Hello, I am Erin. I am the founder and author, motivational speaker. Most importantly, and what I wanted to be all my life is a mother. So I am the mother of 7 and the grandmother of 10. The other experience I have with children is playing with dolls from the time I was all I can remember is baby dolls and wanting to be around children, dolls. And at 9, I was able to begin babysitting. And it just seems crazy these days, but I was also an aunt by the time I was 9 years old. So I was around babies at that time too. And so with all that and just enjoying children more than anything, enjoying being a mother more than anything. And I always had an inclination to have write a book, how to really enjoy your children and love being a parent, being a mother. I maybe someday, but for right now, I'm going to start recording these, maybe weekly podcasts just to talk about that. This came on the heels of being a guest on a homegrown podcast where it was 3 of us together. And during the conversation and hearing from the other mothers, because it was more of a panel and hearing from each of them, so often something would come up, something negative, a struggle, something they went through that just made me want to stop and just talk about that one thing, and how to overcome it or how to use it for good, how to renew your mind in it, how to share this with your children. And because there's so much coming against being a mother, young girls for the very first time in all of history, that isn't one of their goals to be a mother. And it's instinctive. It's instinctive in every creation that God makes as far as women, is that their desire and the blessing of it. And yet now people don't think that way, and it's talked about in the other way. And that those lies, just like the lies that you probably heard that led you to maybe coming to RMI because your marriage was destroyed because you had not known the truth and you'd believed the lies and you came to a place of desperation. But before our children, this next generation, whether they're your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, nephews, because the boys too, they play a huge part in this, of course, and they're totally made differently. They think differently. The influence that we have as older, wise women, and having that gentle and quiet spirit. Nevertheless, we want to speak encouraging words, which means encourage means to give courage. I want to do that in these series of podcasts so that whoever you are, how can you, really enjoy being a parent? How can you love your children? How can you show that love? And also, if you are a mom, how can you help your children to want that so that you will be a grandmother, should God bless? Because there are children who grow up wanting children and they're not able to have them. But I don't want to get ahead of things. I don't have any notes. I just am going on the presumption that I have so much to say. And so I'm just going to start kind of at the beginning. Again, this was kind of talked about in our panel, but I want to just talk about it a little bit more, which is the very foundation, the root of everything is the lies. Understanding that in the world there's lies, and the liar comes to steal, to kill, and destroy. So he wants to steal that blessing from you being a grandmother. If you're talking about your own children, he wants to steal from everyone. He wants to kill the joy of it, and through lies, because he's the father of lies, and to destroy you ultimately, because at the end of the life of most individuals, the saddest are those who are alone. And those who are alone very often are couples that were childless, people who are today putting career first, putting off having children, having prevented having children so that the chemicals or whatever's been done to them, that they can't have children, because children change everything. During the podcast that I just was a guest on, the one guest, Adina, talked about when she first became pregnant and she first felt that baby. There's nothing like that. That's the thing the difference between being a mother, not being a mother, and being able to, as a female, as a woman, to be able to produce that. We are part of creation. I mean, when you think about that, you are actually going to be called upon to create a brand new living human being who's going to grow up, God willing, and could do incredible things. And I just find it astonishing that through the lies and people believing the lies and then repeating the lies, and repeating all the negative, that we're party to stopping this generation that's being born, or they're in childbearing years, missing out on one of the greatest blessings ever. And we know it's true because some of the ones who put it off and then they can't get pregnant, the desperation that they go through, the money invested in all these different medical things that they have to do to themselves, only to find failure after failure after failure. If it's not a blessing, why are they so desperate? Why are they so despondent? Why even try anyway? Well, if it's such a great blessing, it's such a curse, why does it matter? Just move on. But it isn't that way, is it? So those two things one is true and one is a lie. And all you have to do is look at the results of those who couldn't have children and the desperation, and then those who maybe put off having children and they have a child and they're like, oh my goodness, my life has changed. For the first time, I feel love. Loving, it's not like any other kind of love, because God put that in us as mothers and it's there. And so that's the first, is to dispel that lie, speak the truth. And feeling that when I first found out I was pregnant, I was just in awe. Of course, fear kind of came in right at that point. And also right before I was going to have the baby, because I started to think, what if it's true, these scary things that I've heard, not from my mother, thank God, and I didn't have grandparents, I didn't have any aunts, really. I had a distant one that I only met a couple times. But what if it's true, that scary thing? But I dispelled it right away. I thought, no, I'm not going to even think about that. And the same way with having the baby and the difficulties. But even then I thought, what if it's this? But nevertheless, I had such a desire to have children, having been around children. And that's what I think is really missing, is that because families are being reduced, and even if they do have children, a lot of times they're not even being cared for within the family, that they're being sent to daycare or whatever. So the natural way that children would always be around. They'd be in the family, so that you as a young children, young girls, boys, they could see the beauty of that within their own family, with cousins and nephews and things. And maybe that is your family dynamic, and that's beautiful, but some are not even exposed to it. So how can they become exposed to it? How can they see the beauty of it? Or if that mother is a working mom and she's just frustrated because she's trying to do two jobs, she's trying to provide, plus, she's trying to do it of what the normal family has always been, that the mother raises and nurtures and cares for the home. And it's just this loving, safe environment. And then there is a father who goes and provides and comes back to be, play a different role. He plays with the children. He laughs with them. He roughhouses them. It's all the way that God designed it. But the more that we get away from the way the creation is supposed to be, the more problems that occur, and then it lends to reinforcing the problem of having children and the negatives rather than the beauty of it. And so finding out more about that, being around children, giving your children opportunities to be around children. Babysitting was one. As adults, inviting a family, getting to know young mothers and babysitting for them, going to their home so that the baby's comfortable in their environment, if that's the way that it works out, or they can come to your home. But doing that and showing how beautiful it is, and bringing your children in to help play and to nurture or comfort, and all of this, they need to be around it. How do they know? And so it just will reinforce that lie. So I think that's what prepared me to be a mother and to enjoy it, because I knew what I was doing. It came second nature. As a matter of fact, it just was easier than taking care of other people's children, because it was my own child. But going back and first feeling that fluttering, it felt like a butterfly. For a long time, when the baby first starts moving, it feels like a little butterfly. Now, what little girl doesn't want a little butterfly being, inside of them, and having this child that grows and that looks like looks like the father. It's so uniquely and beautifully and wonderfully made. And it was designed to be made in secret. That's what God's word said, to be made in secret. Now we're able to peer in, even though that was even possible back when I was having my first children. I preferred not to, because I didn't want to know. It wasn't that I even knew that promise of his, or that principle that it was made in secret. I didn't know that, but I just instinctively didn't think about that. Now, I'm not talking about if that's what you want to do and it's just norm, and I think it would be so out of the norm. There are some couples that say, no, not interested. And knowing that your body is made for this, and so you don't have to be so afraid of those kinds of things, but mostly is just wanting that child and being around children and helping young mothers. There's nothing better than giving to them. So I think that's the first part that I'd like to say, is that to instill the desires and to dispel the lies, you have to be around children, not in uncomfortable situations, not seeing the children who are tired and they're out shopping and they're having a meltdown, because we'll all have a meltdown if we're put into those situations, right? And so, but to understand that loving a child and looking at and counting the toes and the fingers and how beautifully and wonderfully made, and how kind and how much you can love that child. And when they're sad and they're crying, that this is the way they're communicating, and, asking your forever best friend, your husband, who is your best friend, um, what can I do? Show me how to hold the baby or walk around with the baby or comforting the baby. I think all of those challenges are exciting. And each one is a way of coming through something new. Um, and sometimes they are difficult, but I love those. And I think back on those times, and they do pass. You could be going through a really long period of time. As a matter of fact, the hardest baby that I had was actually my seventh. She, because of maybe the difficulty of her birth, I'm not exactly sure, but some people would call her colicky. I really was never one for labels. I didn't want it on me. I mean, I was considered, you're a tomboy, you're this or that. I didn't like those, so I didn't put it on my children either. I don't know what she was, but she did cry all the time. And I was really challenged, but it turned out to be such a blessing because I, in exasperation and constantly asking my husband what to do. What am I supposed to do? How can I comfort this baby? And people were saying, oh, you need to do this or that. And I said, don't you know? I know about babies. I've tried everything. But what he ended up showing me to do through a book, it was just a little part in this one book. I think it was called The Fussy Baby, but in a nutshell, it was, you need to over mother. And there it is in a nutshell. Mothering is something that we do naturally. And if there's that void in that child for whatever reason, then over mothering that child, giving more than you even have or you think you could have, because this wasn't my only child. I had 6 others that I was mothering in different stages because they were all different ages. But that challenge of doing it and investing that into that child, she turned out to be, at about 7 months, the happiest, best baby ever. She went from, oh my gosh, I don't know that I can handle this, because she was up all night and I had no sleep. And yet she turned out to be the best baby, the sweetest child. And so it's worth the investment. And I just wouldn't want anyone to miss out. No child that's born now, none of my grandchildren to miss out on this. And there's a lot of other lies and a lot of other myths out there. So if you're listening to this podcast and there's a topic that's later on, put it on the bottom, the question that you have. In the podcast that we just had, it came up about, oh, I'm afraid, I didn't want children because I was afraid I was going to be like my mother, or I was going to be, not afford. There's so many things coming against children for today, preventing a child from being born, from even being wanted. And, there's another, I used pro-life speaker for a long time, unwanted child. There's no bigger lie. Everybody wants children. Everybody's desperate now that they've put off having children. So even that can be dispelled. So again, if a topic came up that you said, please talk about this more, put it in the comments. And then I will talk to my husband, my best friend, and I will actually do a whole podcast on that. Maybe, I'm just going to let him lead me on this. I just hope you enjoyed this first podcast, and let's just see how it goes from here. So thank you for listening. And maybe I'll end these like I used to end my first ones. I used to say, ladies, be encouraged. I'll say, moms, grandmas, daughters, be encouraged.